Hello, everybody, and welcome back. In today's episode, we are going to be chatting all about what's been on our mind as we finish the 2024 event season. And we are excited to share some thoughts and learnings with you as we're looking into ending 2024 and going into 2025. So let's go ahead and get into the episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And before we jump into what's been on our mind as we wrap up our 2024 event season, we're going to have our conversation starter. You know them. You love them. Mary, this week's conversation starter is how long... Oh, this is philosophical. I like this. How long do you have to work at something to become an expert at it?
I was thinking about this yesterday, so I wrote this down as the conversation starter because I don't know the answer, but I want to know your opinion more than anything, actually, Logan. There's like this principle called like the 10,000 hours principle, if you've heard of that. And it's like you need to work at something for 10,000 hours to be able to like become an expert at it. So I started doing the math on my phone. I was like, am I an expert at events? And it would take me almost like 25 years to become an expert at events, according to that principle. I'm definitely not there. And then I just started spiraling and I'm like, I think people can become experts without 10,000 hours. So Logan, how long do you think it takes to become an expert at something?
Sorry, I'm also doing quick math here of how, yeah, that is a long time. I was even like, oh, if you do 300 hours of events a year, that's 33 years. I definitely believe in the 10,000 hours principle, but I don't know. I feel like I have a cheeky answer to this because it's like, to me, a lot of what we do can be fake it till you make it, which listeners, it sounds worse than it is, but there's all like to be the expert at times. It's just that you need to know a little more than the next person. And so much of what we do is self-taught. So I don't know. I think there's a level of respect. I feel like I'm definitely getting the longer I've been in the business, in the sense that like, oh, I've now owned a business for 8 years. And I'm passing the 5-year mark. Felt like just a validation in terms of when I talk to people about this of like, it's not my first rodeo. I didn't just start like, and that's something I dealt with all the way up till 5 years. So I don't know. I really don't think it's as long as people would say it is. Do you agree with that, Mary?
I think I agree. I think it applies probably more to people who are, I don't know, like professional athletes or doctors to a certain degree. I don't know, but I think we can still be experts in our field, like you said. So that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know the answer. So listeners, let us know your thoughts. To a potentially controversial question. I don't know, but for our industry, I'd love to hear. So there you have it. And we're going to jump into our topic. We talk about why we pick our topics. And in today's episode, we're talking about what's been on our mind as we finish this event season. And so we're wrapping up the year and we're saving lessons learned for January 2025. We always do a lessons learned episode to kick off season 5 next year. Crazy. But as we wrap this season and this year, we're going to talk about what's on our mind in events and business. And we're excited to kind of just get into it and share what's on our mind. So, Logan, on to you.
Yeah, before we jump into this discussion, we do want to remind you we are hosting the Better Events Conference. It's this month, December, guys. We've been talking about this, I feel like, for 6 months. So it's weird to say we're finally in the month of the Better Events Conference, December 18th and 19th. The 18th is in person in Tacoma, Washington. The 19th is virtual on, coming to any platform where, wherever you are. It's going to have a lot of live content on the 19th, but it will also be recorded. So if you can only join us for part of the day, you do get access to all of that content. One thing in particular that I'm really excited about is a panel we're hosting on Thursday, December 19th, about how you can grow your event career through international events. I feel like, Mary, we get this question all the time. We have an amazing set of panelists who have done work in Canada, the UK, all across Europe, as well as we have someone joining us from Dubai, which I am so thrilled by because I think that really opens up the different markets for folks who are learning about international events. So buy your tickets to join us now at bettereventspod.com/conference. All right, Mary, or I guess we've already prefaced how we are going to talk about this topic. I think I want to preface my answers as listeners. I still haven't done my end of year retreat. I was trying to do it in November. Life stuff happened. This is a good snapshot in time of you're seeing me kind of process things in the moment versus coming incredibly prepared. That's what our January episode will be. But Mary, our first question is nice and broad. What has this year looked like for you overall? Give our listeners a quick little summary.
I think it's been long, but also short at the same time. I don't know. Like, I think time always flies. I think that's just like the nature of time. But really, when I look back at this year, I'm like, January actually does feel like a really long time ago. So I don't know what that means about this year, but that's how I'm currently feeling. But at the same time, like growth, I think can happen so quickly. I've always thought this, especially like running a business or just challenging yourself. Like I am definitely not the same person I was like 6 months ago, let alone like 6 weeks ago. And I feel like that's how it's been every year that I've been in business. And so like in that sense, for a summary, it's like there's things that have been happening, growth, improvement, like lessons learned and all those wonderful things. But I'd say overall it's been rewarding. And we've really been able to develop like as a team in our company and grow some really cool partnerships. And just also though, I'm kind of tired. So just and I think forever throughout this year, battling the constant challenge of time management. It's like one of my biggest, hardest things. So none of that's necessarily changed, but that's where I'm coming from right now. Logan, what about you? What's this year looked like for you overall?
Yeah, this year for me, I don't know. I feel like I've had better balance. And by better balance, listeners, I'm talking about better balance for me. Like I think I've gotten used to most folks. I tell them about my schedule and my travel schedule that I've been on this most of this year, and they go, "Wow, Logan, I couldn't do that." Or that sounds miserable. And I've had to learn that because I've been like, really? It doesn't sound that miserable to me. That like balance to me is going to look different than balance to even you, Mary. Like, and that's the cool but frustrating part of what we do, because you can't just like copy exactly what I'm doing and you would be just as happy, and I can't copy what you're doing and you'll be just as happy. So for me, I felt like looking back at this year, I don't know, I feel like I had a good cadence to things. Like I had a busy month, or like I tell everyone I had a sport filled summer, but I have like multiple 3-week events, which yes, I was exhausted by the end of it, but I really wanted to do all of those things. And the fact that it just lined up the way it did wasn't ideal, but at the same time, I'm really happy I did all those things. And then now I'm in a really like slow season on purpose, and it feels right. Like I don't know. I think I've had the best balance to a year that I've had in business, at least that I remember in the last like 5 years.
I think that's important because like outside looking in, like if I'm looking at your life, I have no context about all of those things that actually like make up a good year for you. And so I think that's just a really great call out. Like I know we tried to not care what people think like a lot of the times, but the reality is like what your year's been, and if you're happy with what it's been, even if it looks different than other people's, and that's cool. Like so I think that's important.
Well, and that sticks with me, Mary, because we were at a networking event or like a industry event, and I told someone, they're like, "Oh, how's your season?" Or they were talking about how it was slow, and they were, seemed kind of disappointed. They wanted more things happening, and then I kind of echoed that. I said, "Oh yeah, it's slow," and they're like, "Oh," and I was like, "No, like a good slow." I want
Like you're
it to
ready
be
for the
slow.
slow.
Like
Yeah.
I've got some personal stuff going on right now that I had no idea was going to happen. Therefore, I just feel incredibly lucky and fortunate that like my schedule kind of worked out that way, but I wouldn't be able to handle more than what I'm doing right now. And yeah, I'm just very fortunate for it. So it's one I'm like, fast and busy isn't always good all the time, because that's how I burnt out years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a season for everything. Like you were saying about the Better Events podcast session that we have our Better Events conference session that we have coming up. Season for everything. And you kind of started hinting to this when you were first sharing your summary of the year, but what were some of the most rewarding aspects of this year's event season?
To pick one, Mary, that's too hard.
I know.
I mean, I think if you went back, listeners, and heard, if you're part of our private community and heard our lovely bonus pod from November where we took you on site with us, I shared some clips that I recorded from the Olympics, and that is constantly, I think, the most pinch me moment of getting to be in Olympic Games. Again, my last one, there was no fans, so being there and, kind of just rolling with it with what my role was. It was a new role. I'd never done it before. And um, had some pleasant surprises come out of that and some extra time that I wasn't anticipating. So I actually got to see Paris, which was just cool. I'd never been there. So I'd say Paris was probably the most rewarding, just from like an overall event. And then looking back at like what I've done this year, I had a goal of trying to land. I wanted like 3 big events. When I say big, I mean revenue big, meaning what I am making on each event is big. And I found that if I had 3 substantial events, that could kind of sustain any other little events that I took on and some of my smaller clients. It would just help even out my cash flow. And I had that locked in by June. I think I talked about it here on the podcast, but that was kind of cool to realize financially. I hadn't been paid this money yet, but I had hit my financial goal of the year in like June, and anything on top of that was just, do I really want to do this event? Do I like working with, like, it just gave me this like peace of mind and flexibility of who I worked with. And that was really cool to feel that and feel a little less of that stress hustle for realizing that, like, personally, I can't take on 50 events. I don't want to take on 50 events. And so therefore I need to have a couple events that are kind of marquee, charging more, that kind of thing. So that's my 2 parts to your rewarding question. Mary, how about you?
Yeah, I think what's hard for me to remember some of the good things, as I'm like really like what like when I look at this year, like what do I have fond memories of and things like that. And I think that we really nailed some events. And we always feel a certain way about how an event is executed. And maybe we're pleased with it at the end of the day. We're like, from the guest perspective, everything went super smooth, but maybe there were, of course, some things behind the scenes. But maybe you feel good about it because at the end of the day, it just worked out. But then other people sometimes have different opinions. But in the end, I would say we got overall good feedback from clients. And that means a lot to me. It means like a lot. Sometimes, like, unfortunately, I wish it didn't mean so much. But because we got the good feedback and they also felt like it went well and we realized that it did as well, that just it is rewarding. Like, that's what we're doing, and I'm happy to know that they felt similarly. Also, once again, could have wiped some negative memories from my memory, but I think there was pretty much like low drama this year just with events, working with so many personalities, which is nice. And working with contractors that we really trust. Like, we've been able to kind of develop like contractors that we'll sort of refer to for most events at this point, and that's been really helpful because it just does take a load off our brains for an event. And so, like, that's been really rewarding. And just team growth and development, like I mentioned before. Ironically, Logan, something that's been rewarding for me this year is less travel. So I have always loved to travel, and it's something that I feel like people in my personal life like know me for it. Like, I see them and they're like, "Oh, where are you going next?" Like, that's their question. And I'm like, actually nowhere. And I'm okay with it. And like, don't get me wrong, like, I feel a little antsy. I feel like I need to go somewhere, but um it's been just nice to kind of have a little bit more like home time, which is something that I've wanted this year. So I've appreciated that. So yeah, those are some of the rewarding aspects from this year.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And that's what listeners, you can have contrasting things for what's rewarding. That's the beauty of it all. There's no one size fits all. I feel like I might have already answered our next question a bit, Mary, but I'll pose it to you. But were there any standout moments or events that you feel like define 2024 for you?
Yeah, I have some specific examples, I think, which is just nice to reflect on. Um, we started doing a contract for a government event, which is cool. It's through like a third party. It's not our government contract, but even then, it's been really interesting to be in that side of events. We haven't really had that experience fully before, and so that's just been kind of a standout because it's something new, like, and it's a really new like part of the industry for us. But it's a big part, and so that's been cool to be a part of that. We also had our biggest contract ever this year, and that was for multiple events for one client. And just completing that, honestly, like, was the standout moment, like, doing their events and being able to participate in, like, a conference in that way. Um, and Logan, I think I definitely shared this with you, but I don't remember if I've shared it on the podcast. I did also, like, an AV production role this year and tried to do that, like, freelance on my own, and it was an experience, absolutely. I remember texting Logan the whole time. I was like, "Oh my gosh." Just being on that production side, I think was really, really valuable. So that's a standout moment to me because to kind of like play a different role, you just learn so much and it makes you a better event planner. And so it was really cool to be able to use the knowledge that I did have, which is not extensive, but it was enough to do the role specifically in production was cool. And yeah, I feel like those are probably the biggest standout moments or events. Any specific that came to your mind, Logan, for you?
I mean, the Olympics, you're going to be like, Logan, you talk about it too much. But
I
that's
mean, it's
obvious.
a pretty
I mean,
big deal.
it's a big one. Guys, you got to wait like every 4 years for the different seasons, every 2 years really for the Olympics. So, that's a big one for me. I also got to work with Athletes Unlimited, a brand new or not brand new. They've been around now, I guess, a couple years, but a sports league that is all dedicated to uplifting women's sports. And I got brought in to produce one of their shorter softball seasons, which was really fun. It was a sport I had never show called or like produced, but I played when I was a kid. And so that was really fun. And just one of those projects that we talk about on here that, like, I don't know, you have that imposter syndrome going into it where it's like, I've done this before for other sports that I've never even played or had any experience in. And yet going into this project, I think I was pretty nervous. If you ask Archie, my partner, he'll be like, yeah, I don't know why you do this all the time. You get really nervous and then you do it and you crush it and you're surprised afterward being like, oh, wow, I'm good at this. And I'm sorry, listeners, I still have this moment. Like, and I'm working on setting my expectations better every time when I get into it, but I was really proud. Like, this was something that, like, going into it, I was just across so many different things. And whenever you get put in with a new team, new client, everything was new about it. Apart from, yes, I came in with the core skill set of like, I know how to call a show. I know how sports presentation works. Like, that was just really cool for me and really rewarding to get to do that. And just like as a sidebar for that, I was in, because it was a sports league, they were very like great at giving us a nice gym membership and certain things that I don't know. I just felt like it was a busy time, but I also got really connected again with like movement and moving my body and all this stuff that just felt really good. And I feel like that teed me up. That was the start of my sports filled summer. And that really teed me up for, I feel like, a really solid summer and now end of the year. So that was another pretty iconic one for myself.
I think that's awesome. And then just looking back from at least when we started the podcast, which is when we started like working together more, uh, it obviously took a few years to like recover from COVID. And during COVID, we all were doing kind of different things. But it seems like this year, correct me if I'm wrong, has been the year for you when you're like, you're doing so many sports stuff now, which maybe is what you used to do. I actually don't know, but it's like really cool because I'm like, look, who's doing this and this and this. And like most of them are sports related. I know you do other things as well. But it just seems like this year has been like a big sports season for you. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say I got back to, I mean, certain things like the Olympics are every 4 years. So
Yeah.
it's like that will not be back next year, you know?
Yeah.
So it is cyclical, but yes, I think my sports has finally came back to where it was pre-COVID. If anything, I've balanced my year better. Like pre-COVID, I was honestly probably like 70% sports, 30% not sports. And right now I would say, while it doesn't look it, I'm honestly probably more of a 60 non-sports, 40% sports.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It doesn't look it though, because those I mean,
Mm-mm.
3 of my sporting events are 3 week, like they're long compared to all my other things. But like I was looking for this episode and like I've done, I think like 25 events this year. And of those 25 events, only, 12 of them were, so I guess it's more 50%, but like 12 of them were sports. And I had a lot more other sports things, but they were just like a 1-day event or a 2-day, they were shorter. But yes, it is again, that balance. I'm feeling better just all around. I feel like it's been a solid year as a business. And I think some of that comes from, yes, getting to do my fun sports stuff.
That makes sense. Thanks for sharing. I just was curious. It seemed like that what you explained makes a lot of sense. But it sounds like a good year overall. And with that, when years change. I think we've seen a lot of growth. Is growth the right word? I don't know. Shifts or trends in the industry, the event industry itself. So, how would you say that this year has shaped your perspective on the events industry?
Deep question, Mary.
I know.
I mean, I don't think I have any huge revelations. I know one of our core principles here on the podcast is, community over competition, which I feel like every year I just feel stronger about that, about how many events, when I look at what I call my event resume, where I keep just a running tab of all the events I've done, the majority of them are coming from community, from people that I work with, people that do what I do but need an extra person to come on site, all of these things. Like, a majority of them come from that. Some of them come from my cold outreach, but a majority are coming from people that I've worked with or met, and then I followed up. And so that to me is just like continuously such a big part of my business, is making sure I rely on my community and network for finding those events. I think, if anything, a smaller thing that I've gotten a little bit more passionate about, and especially with other freelancers, I had struggles last year, and I think I did talk about it here, was with late payments from people. And that is something that, working with some other freelancers, that started being like, well, what are your late payment terms? Like, just being a little more, again, part of that collaborative part, but just talking to other freelancers of like, have you had challenges with this person paying you? Yes or no? Or like, I currently had a thread from last week with someone from an event 2 months ago going, did you get paid? No, I haven't gotten paid either. Okay, who are you emailing? Who are you coming? And then like later, I'm like, what are you going to do when you work with them again next time? And just having some of these dialogues in a way that I think past me would have been afraid to, talk about this with my peers. But I have realized that, again, it's very collaborative, and people are either willing to share, or if they're not willing to share, they're okay just saying no. Like, I don't talk about that, and that's fine. But like, I won't know that unless I ask, for just kind of trying to advocate for myself, especially as an independent contractor, going up against companies that like aren't realizing that them being 2 months late on a payment is actually like has an impact on me, when maybe it doesn't have an impact on them as a big company. So just being a little bit more open and collaborative when it comes to trying to just figure out what all of our, get all our ducks in the row for payments and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. When I'm thinking of like, I think I said it before, like shifts or trends kind of in the industry. I think the word shift is interesting because we've had a lot of shifts over the years in the industry. And I'm not really mad about any of them. Like, if I'm thinking about it, maybe I can't remember some of them, so don't quote me on that. But I think that there are like really good conversations that are happening, like about wellness and self-care and things like that. Also, just like events in general seem like they're being more experiential. Like, we're really trying to answer the question on like, why would somebody actually want to come to your event? Like, that seems kind of like an industry wide thing that people are working on. Um, and it just seems like this year was the year, like similar to what I was saying about you, Logan, where it seems like events are just coming back fully. Like, this was like the year that most things are back. Like, I still had clients reach out to me say like, "Oh, this is our first like in-person event we've done since the pandemic." And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Like, it's 2024 and that's still the case." Um so that's been interesting to kind of see as well. So I think that it just reminds me of like how large our industry is, how many event types there are, and it's really really cool, and that's like super motivating to me. So I don't know if I have any qualms with the industry from this year, but it's just been interesting to kind of see it grow or develop over the years. Also, specifically for this year, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. I think this is probably a thing. I just haven't seen like data on it. But like election years seem to be kind of tough on most industries, but I think ours as well. Like, being in nonprofit and doing fundraising events, the last half of this year, those events did not perform like as successfully. Many of them didn't perform as successfully as they have in the past. So is that a trend? Did a lot of people struggle with that? Like, ticket sales were also super hard the last half of this year. So I don't really know fully what's going on there, but those are things that I've noticed. But I love what you said about partnership as well, Logan. I think that's something that I like. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So I love that as well.
All right. And our next one is, I've already answered this one. Sorry, Mary, I jumped the gun, but how has collaboration with other professionals shaped the way you think about the 2024 season?
I just love what you said. Like, I don't know that I have a ton to add to this either. It's just kind of my favorite thing about events and business. Like, I truly think like most of the things that I've been able to do, I've done because I've been able to partner or collaborate or do something like this podcast and other things. And it's not that I can't do it on my own, but there's just a real power, I think, in collaborating with other people. And so I absolutely love the idea of partnerships. I think you get so much farther with other people. And this year I've been able to kind of start a partnership with others who do events similar to mine as well, which has been amazing. Like I just feel so lucky that there's this true like community over competition like situation going on. It means a lot. I know not everybody gets to experience that, but yeah. So I don't know. I couldn't talk about it enough. I just think that it's what it's all about. Anything
Yeah,
you
and
would
I
add to
think,
that?
well, and also just listeners, like I know I personally also am always thinking about who are new people that I can add to my community and add to my roster and the folks that I've worked with. And again, often when I do calls with people who just want to pick my brain and it's like, okay, yeah, like how do we work together? I mean, hard part is for you to vouch for somebody else to somebody that you trust. You often need to have worked with them already. And so that's where I was like, I get naturally, I'm building my community often from people that I get put on a project with through agencies or other events. And then I'm like, that person was great. I'm going to bring, put them on my list now when I recommend them to other people. And so sometimes it can feel hard to, break in with someone, but I broke in with people by volunteering at their events or again, just trying to continue to foster that relationship through video calls and emails. And so I just encourage you listeners, like you can always make new connections because also like the people I rely on are getting booked, they're getting busy, and or maybe they're raising their rates higher than I can afford to hire, like to book them on, and that's great and I want that to happen for them, but then I need somebody else to come back in and kind of backfill that position. So I'm always looking for new people. um, and I love recommending great people. So I just encourage anyone, if you're thinking and looking to 2025, just think about who you can connect with and reach out to, not necessarily maybe for work, but just to offer some value. And you never know what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're shifting a little bit, talking about like moving into the new year. What are some like skills or resources that you wish that you had this year that you plan to prioritize for next year? Anything
Oof.
come top of mind?
My first one has to be that I love to preach about profit first as my how I do my small business finances. And then I went on Mary's retreat this past January and had a friend of the pod and fellow podcaster Shannon Doe Nicholson point out to me that I was probably doing this one key aspect of profit first wrong. And I love it when people can give you constructive criticism because I was like, no, I'm not doing it wrong. And she was quite kind and goes, why don't you just go back and reread that chapter? And I said, great, I will do that. I reread it and I went, wow, yeah, I was doing some cash flow things wrong, which the way I'll be candid here. The way I was doing it was that I was taking a percentage of anything that came in each month. And that's what I would pay myself. And so I'd have months where I'd have lots of money coming in. And so I would pay myself a lot. And then I'd have months where I really didn't have that much coming in and I wouldn't pay myself that much because it was a percentage of what came in. And with Profit First, they emphasize that you should consistently pay yourself the exact same every month, no matter how much comes in. And then you create kind of like an overflow account so that when you have slow months, you can pull from that to pay yourself still the same amount. When you have big months, though, you don't pay yourself more. You just put it in that overflow fund. And that is something that I started implementing this summer, and it has proven correct. I hate when I was doing it wrong. And it has helped just kind of stabilize my personal cash flow, like how I pay myself as an owner. So that is a strategy I will continue to take into 2025 because it's actually helped me now potentially give myself like an end of year bonus and feel even more prepared for tax time next year. So that's just something that's I think going to help me continue to stabilize my cash flow as a freelancer. So that's a big one. And then you talked about it, Mary, but I feel like I've just started getting better, even better with just managing client expectations. I think you mentioned like not wanting to say, yes, I'll get it done by end of day, Friday or whatever. I still give deadlines to things, but I've learned whatever my first instinct is, I need to add probably a couple days to that. Just again, to manage, like even if I could do it by Tuesday, let's just tell them Friday and I give myself that cushion. And that's just really helped. Again, one of our key like measurements of success as event pros is, did you say you were going to do the thing? Did you do the thing? Bonus points if you did the thing at the time you said you're going to do it. So how about you, Mary? What other strategies are you doing?
I mean, similar to that, it's just better time tracking specifically. So we always track time for like tasks, or I should say, we try to track time for tasks. And that's what I want to improve. Moving on to the next year is like when we get busy, we ironically like forget to track our time, but we need to freaking track the time. It's like the best data that I could possibly use to be able to figure out pricing and things like that. So, like, just doubling down on that, even if you're busy, is super, super important. So, I want to do that next year. And then also, just thinking through how we can improve the service that we're already providing. And so I want to start creating even more templates and just resources and things that even if it's not in our scope, we can easily send it to someone and be like, here, this is just to help, like just to add value, honestly, more value. So that's something that I want to work on during this slow time so that we can just improve what we're already doing, basically, going into next year.
The listeners love templates, Mary. That is one that I feel like you and I both, we get lots of requests for those, and we have our run a show template, which is so popular. But I will say, Mary, that is one of it's forever on my wish list. Never really nothing that I would be like, that I think is helpful for sharing. Like it's too much of a template for my own brain of what I need. But I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm starting to see like the same questions that people keep asking, and that's when I'm like, okay, we can do something about this. So totally. And then as we're looking into the next year, Logan, how do you plan to recharge and reset as you prepare for the next season?
Oh, that's a great question, Mary. I had two friends that have moved abroad this year, to one to Europe and one to Australia. So I am speaking it into being that I will be taking two trips next year, one to Australia and one to Europe to see these people, because I love visiting friends in new places. And if you want to be budget savvy, it's also you got a couch to crash on, or a guest bedroom to crash in. So that is my goal, is to figure out where I can slot those in amongst my annual events that I know are coming up. But I unfortunately don't have more concrete answer to this, because I think I'm going to have to wait to do some of this planning. But I know my Chile trip that I took this year in February was one of the best things that could have happened, taking two weeks off from work. So I'm currently just at least trying to identify the pockets of time, and then I'll try to assign the trip. So how about you? How are you planning to recharge and reset?
I'm starting to do that now just because we're almost done with events for the year. And I mean, the only event we have left is the Better Events Conference. So with that in mind, it's just like, honestly, like I think I've needed this time to not have events. I literally last night I was like, oh my gosh, I'm excited to wake up tomorrow morning and get to work. And I like have not said that in months. And I think it's because I'm like working on things. I'm doing that business development right now. This is the time of year when I have time to do that. And I love that piece of it. And so that is like recharging for me to just kind of do that thing and have the time to do it in a way that I like. Like, I don't know. I'm really pleased with how things are right now. And along with that is just come some natural relaxation as well. Been able to kind of start some new hobbies that are really silly, but like, and I feel like during this season, like my holiday, my personality is just like the holiday season. And so I'm really loving it this year, and I'm feeling good about those things. And I do think that I'll be recharged enough to jump into 2025 strong. And with that in mind, that brings us to the end of our episode. I'm sure we could keep talking, but we have our bonus tip as always, which Logan has for us today.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I might have said this one already, but it just resonated with me as we near the end of the year. But done is better than perfect. That's my bonus tip. I would make sure you write that somewhere so that you can remind yourself. We talk about consistency on the podcast, and I just want to remind you, sometimes you just need to get it done. Like we've had it here with the podcast or my YouTube. I'm like recording in a different location, or I recently had a YouTube shoot for myself that I had to take a couple more takes than I usually do. And we're just powering through and just getting it done. Whatever you wanted to try, like doing, or maybe you feel like you have to do, just know that done is better than waiting for it to be perfect. And as I was thought about this more, Mary, I was like, it could even apply to holiday things. Sometimes just getting things done versus having it perfectly done is better, because it just gets it off your list. So done is better than perfect, listeners.
I love it. Thank you, Logan. Important bonus tip today. So thanks for sharing that or resharing it. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with Logan and I directly on LinkedIn. Just send us a little note so we know that you're a listener of the podcast. And if you want more Better Events content, register for the 2024 Better Events Conference happening this month at bettereventspod.com/conference. And also you can join our private community on Substack. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back with you again next Wednesday.